It should be clear to all Americans that we have a very serious left-wing terror threat in our country. Radicals associated with the domestic terror group Antifa that you've heard a lot about lately, and I've heard a lot about them for 10 years. And other far-left extremists have been carrying out a campaign of violence against ICE agents and other officials charged with enforcing federal law. In Chicago, anarchists have surveilled at least 4 local ICE facilities and posted diagrams of the buildings online, meaning nothing but bad, accompanied by photos of specific ICE agents that they're targeting, one in particular who's a top person and a great patriot. In July, approximately a dozen Antifa-aligned militants stormed the ICE facility in Texas and then lured officers out of the building before firing dozens of rounds at police. They were crazy, frankly, shooting one Texas officer in the neck. And in Portland, Oregon, Antifa thugs have repeatedly attacked our officers and laid siege to federal property in an attempt to violently stop the execution of federal law. Everything we're doing is very lawful. What they're doing is not lawful. And what the governor and the mayor of, as an example, you could say of Portland, and you can say certainly of Chicago, it's not lawful what they're doing. They have to be very careful. In addition, 2 weeks ago, a radical left terrorist in Dallas conducted a sniper attack on a local ICE facility, killing 2 people and leaving behind a note that read, "Hopefully this will give ICE agents some real terror." That's bad. This attack came the very same month that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a far-left extremist who inscribed the words, "Hey, fascist, catch," meaning catch the bullet, onto the bullet shelf itself. The epidemic of left-wing violence and Antifa-inspired terror has been escalating for nearly a decade. At universities, Antifa has organized riotous mobs to attack campus speakers. I see it all the time. And these are agitators, anarchists, and they're paid.
Okay, we've been listening to this roundtable discussion happening right now with President Trump and independent journalists about Antifa. And we want to bring in our Scripps News investigative correspondent, Patrick Terpstra. So listening in, we just heard a few minutes of what the president was saying about Antifa, but what's your initial response? I know you've done a lot of fact-checking on this.
Well, this has obviously been a big focus for the president and his allies, this notion that quote-unquote Antifa is responsible for a lot of the violence that's taking place and all the protests that are taking place at ICE facilities. But you have to take a step back and ask, well, what is Antifa? And of course, the answer is that it is a decentralized movement, more of a movement than it is like a group. Even though it has been declared a terror organization by the Trump administration, it's not actually something like you might think about Al-Qaeda, where there's a leader, where there's a structure, things like that. And what we've noticed is that a lot of the people that they are talking about having gotten into entanglements with quote-unquote Antifa, those are actually just protesters. And some of those protesters truly have been violent, but they are lumped together in this notion of Antifa. And when you take a look at what they actually, the Trump administration will say about people and this violence, when it's not in something like this setting, but when it's in a perhaps a court setting, it's more Antifa aligned. So people that maybe are aligned with this notion of Antifa, but not exactly connected to any sort of group.
Well, and we heard our own Jacob Gardenswartz really lay it out earlier, I thought in a good way, that it's really more like talking about something like feminism, like a belief system, but not, you know, an organized group that you go find their website or they're recruiting active members. A formal group, I guess, is the word I'm trying to say.
Well, there is one group that's out there in Portland, the Rose City Antifa group. That's the one group that everybody can actually find. They've got a website and they are proud Antifa members, but that is pretty unusual. You don't find that other places, and it's certainly not a national movement. But of course, the national movement is protests. There are a lot of people protesting what's happening with ICE, but there's a huge difference, of course, between people exercising free speech and committing violence.
I have so many more questions for you, but we are out of time. But I want to thank our investigative correspondent, Patrick Terpstra, for that. Thank you so much, Patrick, and we'll be right back.